sometimes we forget about our own culture and hierarchy and so forth. So our experiences in Singapore, where actually I'll start with UCLA. Experiences at UCLA, the professors were often salivating for debate and discussion. They wanted their ideas to be tested. They wanted kind of like fierce. This
Mhm.
camp believes this. This camp believes this. You know, when we would try to do that in Singapore, the professors, I think, were kind of offended by that, and seniority matters. And I'm not trying to poo-poo on Singapore because wow, what have they built? Um, but I will say I think it's important for us to kind of recognize just as we're just as employees can kind of self-select in and self-select out, as leaders, we the more we define our culture, the more we recognize like the types of people that will also do well for us.
Welcome to Leadership Disrupted. This podcast started about 2 years ago with a premise, a thesis, really, if I'm trying to sound smart, that employees are changing, they're restless, they're resistant, they're rewired in terms of how they think, how they work, how they relate to leaders. And many, maybe most leaders, frankly, are not meeting the moment. The old leadership playbook is becoming less and less relevant. And we need something new, a new and adaptive and kind of morphing. I don't want to call it a playbook because even that word feels a little like old speak, but we need some new leadership thinking. And when we were conceptualizing this podcast, I essentially wanted to talk with other leadership thinkers from a range of perspectives about what they are seeing and how they are leading and what they see going forward. And so this podcast actually was initially just an excuse to have these conversations in a formal way. And then over the years, it's evolved into something a little bit more formal, but the core is still absolutely this: find an interesting leadership thinker and ask them, what the hell's going on? And then that question basically creates a conversation, and then that creates a podcast. And so, with that in mind, today we have Brian Samson, the founder of Plugg. That's Plugg, double G. They connect the engineering talent pool across the Americas with hyper growth companies. And Plugg places over 100 LATAM based engineers and adjacent talent with US based companies every year. And what I know is that Brian's work life story, really his entire life story, it embodies and reflects so much of what's changing in our world. So many geographies, cultures, businesses, environments, leadership experiences. And I really want to unpack the whole thing carefully because I think there's so much there, because I know there's a lot for all of us to learn from Brian. So, first of all, Brian, welcome. It's great to have you here. And I want to take this in phases, starting with kind of your early years. But before I do that, is there anything like you initially want to share just to kind of frame up who you are, so we understand you, and then we'll go into the early years of Brian Samson, so to speak?
Yeah, well, first off, really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm really honored. Uh, maybe the macro view for anybody listening is just like you. I'm a Midwest guy, grew up in Illinois. Actually, I appreciate the comments about me being well traveled. Believe it or not, I didn't have a passport until I was 28, and
Wow.
then have kind of
Mhm.
had a whirlwind ever since. So I think that's really kind of kept me grounded, and whether I'm in Hawaii or Buenos Aires or Singapore or wherever,
Mhm.
I still remember the Midwest winters that we talked about early, and I think it kind of keeps you in your place.
I suppose anytime there's like a minor Hawaiian annoyance, it keeps you grounded to say, okay, yeah, but there's no snow. Yeah, but it's not freezing. Not to say Hawaii doesn't have its own, environmental issues, but
Sure.
definitely for most of us, living in Hawaii has got to be like living in paradise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No complaints. Yeah.
so then if we go to your early career lead, could you tell us your career story? And because I do think the variety of perspectives or experiences that you've had really did help to bring you where you are here today. But when you talk about, because I know that you worked for Google for a while, you've worked in not just Silicon Valley but other environments. Maybe let's just take the first little phase and tell us your story, like what brings you up to today, like where you are and what you're doing today. And then we can dive deeper into what you see in the leadership space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I'll start with just what my world looks like today, just so people
Yeah.
kind
Okay.
of see the outcome, and then how it all started. So today, I'm the founder of 5 different companies, or founder slash investor. And if you look at the Rich Dad Poor Dad world of Robert Kiyosaki, there's a sequel to that called the Cash Flow Quadrant. And I think this is a good map of maybe how I've thought about my own career, where in this book there's 4 quadrants. You move from employee to kind of like self-employed, like doctors, attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
therapists, and then business owner, and then investor. So I've kind of spent time in each of those quadrants, and now I'm probably more on the investor side. Um, and My biggest company is called Plugg, as you mentioned. So we've got about 100 or so team members. Most of that is Latin America. I have another company called Bali Staffing, which we were talking in the pre-show about our Boston Terriers. Bali is actually the name of my dog, so I named that business after my dog. And that does like RPO, which basically means we're renting recruiters out. The other companies I have is a locksmith company here in Hawaii that I'm really more of a investor in. I have an operator, a cleaning company, very similar structure. And then the last one is a AI implementation company, again, very similar structure, where I'm really just offering my experience and some capital, but otherwise working with,
Mm-hmm.
really hungry, motivated operators. But how it all started, Midwest upbringing. My dad was an accountant, which meant that everything had to be earned, and tracked. So if I wanted to make money, there were things to do, and mostly for neighbors. Everything from tarring driveways to mowing lawns, was how I really got started. Um, Although I've really shifted entrepreneurial later in life, I didn't start that way, and I didn't know anyone that was
Mm-hmm.
really an entrepreneur. We all think about entrepreneurship in kind of this person's dad owns the plumbing company, this person's mom, owns the veterinarian shop, and it's all small businesses. I never really thought about the world that way because my dad worked for the same company for 30 years. My uncles, all similar. And then my first kind of real jobs were in the restaurant world, which I think is a great place to start, because I was exposed to in Chicago. Half the staff was from Mexico. I was usually on the closing crew. So
Mm-hmm.
big, loud Mexican music as, everyone's hustling, working hard. We would, for fun, on the weekends, maybe have like a US versus Mexico soccer game, and we always got annihilated by them. And then sometimes I'd go over and, after work, hang out at their apartments, and you realize, wow, there's like 9 of them in a 2-bedroom apartment, and, it kind of humbles, pretty
Yeah.
quick about like where you come from. But anyway, I learned a lot about, I think, cultures and training, because you see in the food services industry, there's a lot of different personalities. kind of like a high stress, high pressure, environment. Labor's not paid very well. And I remember just seeing all different types of management styles, all the way back then. I still remember a lot of those original managers. And usually the 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 personality or what they would focus on would always be course correct, right? Hey, you're doing this wrong. Let me fix it kind of right in the act. And I had this one manager named Ron. I'll still remember him, 20 plus years later, maybe even more now. And he had a total flip on that. When he was around, everybody's mood was up. Everybody's spirits were up. He was relatively young, probably like mid 30s maybe. And when he would walk the line, usually when managers are walking the line, you kind of tense up because you're worried about what they're
Yeah.
going to catch. What are you doing wrong? With Ron, it was trying to catch you doing something right. And there's a whole book on that later. If you read, the 1 Minute Manager series, I think it's called Whale Done, and
Right.
about catching people, right. And I read that book after I met Ron, and like, oh, that's what Ron was doing. But it was fun, and you wanted to be caught doing something right, and people were relaxed. By the way, I think sales probably performed really well, and the morale was good, the crew was happy. And I think that, I mean, gosh, I was like a teenager, late teenager, just trying to pay for college. But that still is, I think, a big building block of maybe how I thought about leadership early.
Well, and even though one could call that part of the classic leadership playbook, because like Whale Done, that was Ken Blanchard in the 80s, I think. I I could definitely see an opportunity for more of that kind of Whale Done, catching people doing things right in today's world. I think maybe it's because of the speed and pace of business. Maybe it's because of the complexity or other pressures, or maybe it's because um, leaders and managers have more direct reports. Back then in the 80s, that was the classic of, hey, you don't ask a leader to have more than 7 or 8 direct reports. Today, it's not at all unusual for a leader to have 10, 12. I've heard 15. And not only that, but now today, many leaders are expected to be what some people call player coaches. You're expected to do a job and lead 7 people, do a job and lead 12 people. So a third of your time and energy is doing the work, whatever the work is, or maybe more. I just think there's more on leaders. So whether it's real or not, I think there's a perception amongst some of them: who has time to do all of this? Who has time to do all of this? Finding people winning, finding people doing things right. That's what I pay them to do. And yet, I know that many employees yearn for that, particularly the more talented, the higher performing employees. Sometimes we think, well, higher performers, they're sort of self-motivating. They're self-starters. That all may be true, but even the most self-motivated self-starter in the world can still get a boost out of somebody authentically acknowledging, hey, that was really cool. That was a nice job. I love your take on that. I love how that worked out, whatever that might be. But I think as much as they yearn for it, they get less and less of it today.
Yeah, yeah. I often try to take Ron's playbook, and but I still reserve it for when I think it's really remarkable performance.
Sure.
But I'll respond just really quickly with like A plus 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 plus, like love this,
Yeah.
and I think people appreciate it.
Without a doubt. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. So we were kind of going through your trajectory.
Yeah, and then after school, So I studied management in Illinois at a public university. Um, got right into the world of recruiting. I think I was very lucky in that I was in the Chicago office downtown, but I was in what we call the national accounts group.
Mhm.
So that meant I had broad exposure to really like the whole country, and I would recruit candidates and for some of these technologies will date me, but PeopleSoft consultants in Walnut Creek, California,
Uh-huh.
and pharmaceutical project managers in Groton, Connecticut, and Java developers in Nashville and Kentucky. And I think that just gave me this like real wide view of regions, talent pockets, countries, what people have in common, what things they
Mhm.
don't have in common, and how to connect with people, pretty quickly, on the phone. And that was really good for me. I ended up doing pretty well, and before I knew it, I was in my mid 20s managing a team of 14 other people. Half were in Chicago, half were in Boston. So learning how to manage people remotely, lead them,
Mhm.
which now is pretty normal, but I think it was pretty challenging. I think as a mid-20s person, and I'm trying to devour leadership books, which sometimes I think can be confusing because you're mixing concepts and kind of all over the map, and like I'd read something and want to try it that day, and how we are when we're in our 20s.
But being
Without,
exposed to the remote
yeah.
world of leadership early, I think is really helpful because during the pandemic, of course, a lot of organizations, most organizations, shifted everyone, to work from home or work remotely, and their preparation of leaders consisted of, well, give them a webcam and a microphone,
Hmm.
and then just keep doing whatever you were doing, and then they were shocked, surprised that engagement was lower, that accountability seemed to drift, that relationships seemed to drift, uh, and then some organizations develop the perspective that, well, I guess you can't really have deep connections virtually. I guess you can't have really effective leadership virtually. But I'm sure you would agree with this because I have been working and leading remotely for 20 years now, close to 20 years. And I've learned that I have to be very intentional, that it is harder in many ways. You have to pay much more attention. You have to reach out and connect with people. You have to think more because you're not walking down the hallway and you suddenly notice that Alice is quiet today.
Hmm.
In the past, I would notice that Alice is quiet, and then I would make an excuse to, come and engage with her and have a conversation. Well, if Alice is having a bad day, virtually, her leader, need to have intentional ways to be connected with her enough to figure that out or to know that. But that's again, that takes a different kind of mental effort than what most
Yeah,
leaders are invested in.
yeah, I absolutely agree. I will say that. So this time period was the mid 2000s, so like 2005,
Mhm.
6, 7, somewhere around there. I don't think the world was really used to that remote management. So for me to be effective, I would have to travel to Boston at least monthly
Mhm.
just to maintain that kind of personal connection. Where I think now it's not that big of a deal. You could go 6 months, a year, even longer without seeing somebody, um, as long as you have at least one or two physical touch points, every so
Yeah.
often. But back then, if I didn't have those touch points, if I didn't go to Boston and go out and have a beer, go to a Red Sox game, whatever, um, I would lose it. I would kind of lose that connection,
Mhm.
there's that adage of I'm going to butcher the quote, but people don't care until they know you care or something.
Yeah.
You probably can spout it out, but I
What is
can't.
it? People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
there you go. I knew you'd know that one. But um, yeah, I think if we didn't have enough touch points where I could just learn who they were as a person,
Yeah.
and take them out to lunch. If we didn't have those touch points or went too long, I think it started to fall apart a little bit. So then, me, hey, you missed your numbers. It carries a lot less weight.
And I'll only push back on that gently because I have a couple of direct reports who I might meet once a year because
Yeah.
they're like a couple of them are in India, and I only have an opportunity to go about once a year. But recognizing that I do every week, I have a one-on-one with each of them, and it took me a while to figure this out, but I had to put that at the top of my priority list because
Mhm.
it was so easy week by week to say, well, we don't have any, I don't have anything on the list. So all of our projects are green, nothing really to talk about. And it was so easy for those meetings to go away. And the
Yeah.
mistake I made early on was that's what, and I didn't realize what I was communicating to them is our relationship is essentially a list of projects.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally decided, okay, that is true. We have a list of projects, and I want to have more of a human connection with these folks. So then I began putting those meetings at the top of my priority list. It's just 30 minutes a week, and we make that happen come hell or high water. We do it at a time that works for them, not for me. The mistake I also made is I originally had asked them to recommend times, and they were so used to booking times in their evening that would work for their American colleagues that they just suggested those times, and I went along with it. Um, Once I realized, oh, I don't think you're actually choosing this time, and so we picked a day of the week where I would typically be up late anyway, and I would have their so it would be their morning the next morning, uh, and I would just choose that okay those Wednesday evenings are my work evenings, and so instead of watching the latest Game of Thrones replay, I'm gonna have this meeting, and and I again it was a little thing, but I
Yeah.
think it genuinely showed them I'm looking to be more than just a project manager with you. I'm looking to have some kind of working relationship
Yeah.
with you. And I can't tell you how that's paid off in terms of the times when you need someone to stretch a bit, the times when you need someone, or when you need to deliver coaching, and and you really need them to hear you regarding something. You get so much more from people who feel that level of connection with you, as opposed to um, just a supervisor or a boss.
Yeah.
Keep doing this. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Um,
Please, no, I like the back and forth. I like it. Um, so anyway, fast forward. I ended up in California, Orange County for a quick blip, and then San Francisco. San Francisco was really my first exposure to entrepreneurship, but it's such a wild world of entrepreneurship out there where it's everything you see on TV of
mhm.
uh, people with their MacBooks and coffee shops working on startup ideas, and investors are milling about, and founders are all around. Everywhere you walk, you see a familiar tech logo, Salesforce Tower, and Twitter, and Google, Meta, Oracle, everywhere, right? And now it's all the AI companies. But it's wild, everywhere you go, and there's
And if
billion.
anybody isn't familiar with it, correct me if I'm wrong, but even though it was done for humor, the series
Yeah.
Silicon Valley
Oh,
gets
it's
a lot of it
fantastic.
right. It's very funny and extreme, but a lot of it is
A
gotten it right.
lot of it is right. Yeah, yeah. I was living there when the show was airing. I'm like, oh my
Oh
god,
man.
yeah. So, but that was really interesting. I worked for Google for a little while as a contractor, and um, It was so interesting, and this is a one person experience. I didn't love my time at Google. And I think this podcast perfectly captures what we're all trying to understand. I had everything but somebody that cared about me. I
Yeah.
had 4 gyms and 20 cafeterias and all the Ottawa smoothies I could drink, and um, swimming pools and volleyball courts and ball pits. And I mean, it's crazy. You go to the campus in Mountain View, which is their world headquarters. Um, but I didn't really like. All I was a number producing machine. That's it.
Yeah.
Uh, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. And like people that had I never worked there, like, what are you talking about? This is like utopia. No, I actually felt more appreciated at companies that wouldn't even spring for coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, I
Let
mean,
alone
wasn't Google the original uh, foundational start of KPIs, key project indicators?
OKRs, yeah,
Okay,
OKRs.
OKRs. Okay.
Yeah,
And so Google founded OKRs, and now OKRs have spread across the world, and essentially every human working for them was a bundle of OKRs
yeah,
and objectives and key results. And that's not wrong. It's just not enough to
yeah,
feel valued as a human.
yeah, yeah. So I went the rubber band way and went to very small startups. And my role was usually like a head of talent, just a fancy way to say, I ran recruiting and anything that was kind of connected or adjacent to HR or the office space
Mhm.
or IT help desk or facilities, random things. But recruiting is where I made my money because that's the critical part. Startups make or break it, based on their ability to get great talent that can move their product forward.
Mhm.
And typically, what happens if you've never worked in the tech world is you run a pretty lean team. Everyone's working a ton of hours, and then you raise some capital and you raise some pretty significant amounts of capital, 10 million, 20 million, $50 million at a pop. These AI startups today are kind of at a whole other sphere,
Yeah.
raising $100 billion checks, right? I'm not even sure there's a check that can fit that many zeros, um, at the time, this is like the world of software as a service, SaaS companies just trying to grow. It was the golden age of SaaS.
Mhm.
And my job would be, okay, we've raised a bunch of capital. Now you got to build our team, Brian. And I would go about doing that. I had a couple different companies that I was at, so I got to like see a wide variety of cultures and management styles there. Um, I will say I read this book when I was there. That's still one of my all-time favorite business
Mhm.
books. It's called the Hard Things About the Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And as you nod
Mhm.
your head, I assume you're familiar with
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
So Horowitz, Andreessen Horowitz, now the big VC firm, but he talks a lot about his experience at Loud Cloud. And there's a part of this book that I think made me really think about the intentionality of the cultures I was at. And I'll give an example later. But with Ben Horowitz, he talks about, and he's like he's an interesting guy. He'll always quote rappers and he curses, and a white Jewish guy from Berkeley.
Mhm.
Um, and he was talking about one day he's cursing in the office to his team. He's the CEO of this tech startup. And one of his team members came up like, I don't really like that you're cursing. This isn't really part of the, a good culture. And I think this is a light bulb for him and translated to a light bulb for me of
Mhm.
whether you're a culture where you curse or you don't, you should tell everybody what you want the environment to be, right?
Yeah.
And then people just kind of opt in or they opt out. And it got me thinking about, I worked at another tech startup, and I actually kind of clashed with the CEO about something, where I got along with most of the team, but clashed with the CEO about this issue where maybe you can appreciate this. Midwest guys, we try to say our please and thank yous,
For sure.
and there was a bunch of requests coming over to my team, and it was just, we need this, or and I would respond back like, how about a please?
Yeah.
Thank you. And that was risen by other people to the CEO, who said, hey, like, we're a startup, that's not really our thing, we don't need to do that. And I was pretty livid. I think really two things. Number one, I think you should be doing that. This is just common courtesy. I think that's the kind of culture I want to work in. But two, huge missed opportunity by him by not doing the Horowitz book of, hey guys, like, we're a move fast, don't worry about
Yeah.
common courtesies. And by the way, like, maybe I would have opted out of that company anyway, but I
Or
think,
or maybe we explain it and then we say, you know what, every week we're
yeah,
going to start with our Uber please. Just
yeah,
so know that the please is implied or the
yeah,
niceties are implied.
yeah,
It's not that we're jerks, it's
yeah,
that we're busy. And just that alone can be enough of an explanation where you go, okay, I'm not going to take the over directness over personally. Now,
yeah, yeah. A
I will
great
say,
point.
me as a Midwesterner, even though I've been told not to, I'm still nice to my AI. I have a hard time just being so, do this, get this, and I've been told, oh, that's not, it's not efficient, and actually your AI doesn't care.
Mhm.
Well, but maybe it's more about me than about the AI. So I
Yeah.
will say please. I will say thank you. I've even said good job. Like that was great.
Yeah.
Whether it helps the AI or not, I think it helps me a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's what you said though about the implied please at the beginning, or you know,
Mhm.
giving people a sense of, this is the way the company operates, and really the only person who could do that is the CEO, and
Yeah.
everyone either buys into it or they move themselves out of the organization. That's what culture is. And it makes me think about another example where I was trying to be on the forefront of the recruiting world. And this sounds very, very normal today, but back in 2010, 2011, this was new, which was video job descriptions.
Mhm.
And I was working with this small startup that would come in with, big camcorders, and, but not try to overproduce it, just like authentic videos
Mhm.
with the hiring manager. And it made me think about opting in, opting out, self-selecting in. And we spend a lot of time as recruiters talking to candidates, usually a 20, 30-minute screen, just to get them in the process. Explain the culture, explain the manager, explain the job. What have you done that relates to that? And if you're a candidate in demand, your time is valuable, and you don't want to talk to 10 different recruiters, all week.
Yeah.
What if we could do this? Just send them a 3-minute video of the hiring manager. I'm just in the office. There's no fireworks or mass production.
Mhm.
I'm just in the office, and we do this all the time now on Instagram and wherever,
Sure.
with our iPhone. But 15 years ago, this was not a normal thing, and people could just, recruiters would just say, "Hey, if you're interested, why don't you just take 2 or 3 minutes, watch this video." And who doesn't want to know what their future boss is like? Who would rather talk 30 minutes to a recruiter than a 3-minute video? And I'll illustrate that so it was really early in these days, and my wife at the time, girlfriend, I said, "Hey, check this out. I want to show you something cool." So we click on one of the videos on their site, and it was just like I had described about Silicon Valley culture. There's no women in the startup. There's like 8 guys
Mhm.
in an exposed duck brick building. Somebody scoots by on a skateboard in the background. It's just like all testosterone, and laptops. And she's watching this, for like about a minute or so. Oh my God, I would never work there. And this was this like light bulb that came on my mind. Like this is exactly why we have these, because
Yes.
you're getting people to, either when they apply, they're really enthusiastic because now they know what to expect, culture, future boss.
Mhm.
And you also save a lot of people's time by getting people that weren't fits in the first place. And maybe to that startup with the please issue, maybe I would have opted out early because this isn't this isn't the kind of environment that I wanted to be in.
So much information gets passed through in a 3-minute video like you just described that might never even make it into the conversation, because, a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth whatever, 1,000,000 words. I mean, there's just so much data that's being transferred. You gotta love that reaction. I would never wanna work there. Fantastic. So now we move on to next,
Yeah,
whatever next is.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that was my really exposure to entrepreneurship. A couple success stories. I was never the founder there, just along for the ride. And finally had the courage to do my own thing. I like to say I did it on easy mode and hard mode. And what I mean by that is I actually raised capital. So I
Uh-huh.
had an investor, a thesis to build software for this industry called fintech, raised about $2 million, which seemed like an enormous amount of money from where I came from. Didn't really get you very far in San Francisco.
But
And
now, hold on, I have to stop you.
yeah.
So you didn't learn all the lessons of Silicon Valley. If your thesis was just that, isn't it like absolutely mandatory that your thesis starts with, we're going to make the world a better place through software. We're going to save the world through software or something.
I think that might have been the pilot episode
Yeah.
of Silicon Valley, or the season finale of #1. And I still, like, when I rewatch that sometimes, I laugh so hard when they've got like 3 or 4 of them in a row. Oh my
Right,
God,
right.
it's fantastic. I love. Thank you for bringing that up. That makes us smile. So ended up moving to Buenos Aires, Argentina for a year. Convinced my wife that, no kids yet. Let's have a little adventure. No Boston Terrier yet in the
Mhm.
picture. And we lived there for about a year. So easy mode was you have some capital to make bad decisions with, and hard mode, and I'm building a new business in a new country, which, by the way, is usually ranked around the 150th out of 200 countries in the world in ease of doing business. Very ambiguous, inflation,
Mhm.
stuff that makes you want to pull your hair out. But you learn a lot about engineering culture across continents and countries. You learn a lot about what you want to be intentional about and what you care about. And I start thinking about values. Um, and just like little things that just set the scene. um, they drink mate in Argentina. For those that don't know, it's this
Mhm.
little cup, and it's kind of this like tea, uh, and they just sip on it all day long. They end up having dinner at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, so this is like caffeine on steroids, and it just keeps you going. But you don't usually have your own mate. There's like a mate for the office. And you just kind of pass it around. So there might be one mate cup, for like a 20-person pod, and
Uh-huh.
sip it, pass it to the next person. So if you're a germaphobe like me, this
Yeah.
yeah. Or when you get to the office, if you're the last person in the office, you go around to everyone sitting and you kiss them on both cheeks. This person, you go to the next person, man, woman, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
You're doing that. And I think that combined with, it's not only the 9 o'clock dinner, the Tuesday dinner out is still 3 or 4 hours long, and you're not eating over 4 hours. You're kind of done in the first hour, appetizer, entree, dessert,
Mhm.
but that dessert coffee part will last the next 2 or 3 hours. And no one has this, it's all under the table,
Yeah.
and they're just talking. And I think that was just absolutely fantastic for me to experience after 5 years in San Francisco, where it was kind of the opposite. It was move, move, move. Everything's urgent, instant gratification, iPhones, notifications, to this world of let's slow it down. And there's nothing more important than friends and family and community. And it was everything that I needed at the time. And then grew that company to about 85 engineers, um, moved to Hawaii, started to have our family, realized that traveling from Hawaii to Argentina is not easy.
Mhm.
So I sold my stake in that business, but decided to stay in that Latin America world. I just found the talent to be incredibly interesting and overlooked and undervalued. Um, Highly educated, uh, US style English, time zone alignment, attractive prices. But behind the hood was even the more exciting thing. They've lived in really distressed environments most of their lives. Imagine waking up, we talk about inflation or egg prices. Imagine waking up and, you've got $10,000 in your bank account on Monday. And then on Tuesday, that 10,000 is now 1,000 and you can't do anything about it. Just
Jeez.
overnight,
Yeah.
your country was pegged to the dollar and then it was all vapor. Uh, just insane. So because of their lack of trust in their own financial systems and government, this is a population that is just innately creative, flexible, adaptable,
Mhm.
um, great problem solvers. They find workarounds. They do very well. They're very calm under chaos. And it made me think about, as an entrepreneur, no matter what business I was in, I'd want people like that. I think these are the intangible skills that you really want in addition to the domain skills. So even though I sold my shares in that business, I've been all in on Latin America ever since. And I've had two other businesses. The one that I operate today is Plugg. And we're not just in Argentina, Mexico, Nicaragua, Brazil, a couple other countries. Um, that those parallels do exist in these other countries too,
Yeah,
where
that entire area of the world,
yeah,
um, just nonstop wave after wave of various disruptions in what's
yeah,
happening in their life.
yeah, and I think 25% of Americans have a passport. Um, we don't know a whole lot about what's going on other than what's on Netflix or what's the headline in the newspaper. So we think about Latin America in terms of, wait, did we just capture the leader? Maduro was his name, or what's this like
Mhm.
cartel stuff happening? But we forget about the hundreds of millions of people, in this part of the world that are hardworking, and eager to show what they can do.
And our lack of understanding and awareness makes it easy for a president to say, "Yeah, we own Venezuela now. Yep, Venezuela is ours now."
Exactly.
And if you don't know any better, well, then I guess so. When in reality, it's of course not anything close to that.
Right. Yeah.
You do give me a little bit of hope, Brian, because I think a lot of the turmoil and disruption that Latin America has experienced for decades, and so they've acclimated to that. They've adopted to that. I think part of what's happened post pandemic in North America, in the U.S. in particular, we're still adapting to it. We haven't figured out how to acclimate to that. So there is a lot of disruption anxiety. There is a lot of
Yeah.
um, uh, distrust, a lot of active paranoia, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of, hey, how do I? There was a time in the 80s and 90s, you could go to a career counselor at your college and say, look, I want a stable career that will do this, this, and this.
Mm.
And the career counselor would ask you a set of questions. They would open up the book. What color is my parachute? Or open up some other book, or go through a process. They would ask you some questions, and it would be boop, 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 boop. Yeah, you should pick one of these 3 paths. Okay, I'll take that path. And
Mm.
now, I just spoke with a university career advisor. He said it's the question he hates because he doesn't have good answers. He said now when someone comes in and wants advice, there's so much uncertainty. Every piece of advice I give them has to be caveated
Yeah.
again and again. So I think part of maybe what we're experiencing with the U.S. based workforce, in terms of, I mentioned that restlessness, that resistance, that uncertainty, that anxiety. Maybe if given enough time, we will acclimate to that and then be
Yeah.
able to navigate those waters with a little more calmness, like you might see in whether it's Buenos Aires or somewhere else, where they just understand disruption is the nature of the world, and we're just going to flow with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if my kids are still a little bit younger, but if they were to graduate college today, I would really prepare them. There's nothing more important you can do than invest in yourself and invest in your ability to be curious, be creative, don't lose your critical thinking skills.
Mhm.
And work ethic still matters too. But just be prepared that the only thing, and by the way, we've been hearing this for 20, 30 years, that the only thing constant is change. I mean, it's just more so now than ever. There's no other way around it. You just have to be ready to uh, pivot when you need to and not freak out.
I think it may be that the literal changes that are occurring in our world are not incrementally greater,
Mhm.
but the noise behind them, I think, creates a different environment where we are so overstimulated with
Mhm.
social media, with information overload. There's like so much coming at us day in and day out that I feel like the cognitive overload makes it more challenging to navigate the changes that are occurring. Makes it feel like this is so much worse than it was 20 years ago, and maybe to some degree it is. Maybe there are some fundamentally more dramatic changes, like what's being driven by AI or
Yeah.
whatever. But or maybe it's this perfect storm of cognitive overload and dramatic change and uncertainty, and you have um, fake news, misinformation. You have so many disruptions. I think this perfect storm, at some point, it has to crack. I mean, at some point, something's going to have to give. And my fear would be that it's somewhat of like a French Revolution. Not that people aren't going to. I don't know that people are going to rise up and kill the politicians, but I don't know that that's not going to happen either. I mean, there is a strong sense of anxiety and anger in the
Mhm.
world, and the this external culture that we're talking about, this world culture, this environmental culture. There was a time in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s where you could talk about corporate culture and almost like it's its own bubble. Like, here's the corporate culture that we want to create, and we're going to make that happen. I think the outside culture infuses itself into the inside culture. So you cannot ignore that your employees are feeling the burden of unfairness, or that your employees are being exposed to on social media. I'll give you a quick example. I had a young man who worked for Amazon in the warehouse, in one of their warehouses. Great guy, hard worker, wanted his job, needs his job, acknowledges that he's paid well, but he described his life, and he said, as a 27-year-old young man, I should not have. And then he described his aches and pains. He said, my body is paying the price for doing this work. Yeah. And he said, then I come home at the end of the day, having had my productivity monitored down to such finite level where someone is watching me or tracking me, or my manager has to come over to me at the end of the week to say, hey, your productivity is down about 2% week over week. Is there anything going on? Are you okay? And he said, Big Brother is watching me all the time. And then I come home, I go to sleep on my couch, I wake up, I'm scrolling through Instagram Reels, and I see Jeff Bezos with his new wife sailing away from their $50 million wedding on his $600 million yacht. And he said, honestly, yeah, they pay me well. I need this job, but something's not right. Something's not. And so you cannot escape that outside culture impacting the inside culture for some employees, for many employees, I think.
Yeah, sure.
So I did it again. I interrupted you. You were in the middle of a flow. So as we look at your world today and the employees you engage with, the clients that you engage with, if someone were to ask you, what does it take to be a really great leader, like a leader who draws people to him or her, what does that take for particularly a leader of talented employees? And that's not to say that every employee isn't talented in some way, but I do think what happens is the more talented someone is, the more restless they are, the more edgy they are, the more they feel like I have options. And as leaders, those are the ones we want to keep. Those are the ones we want to retain. Those are the ones we can build our businesses on, is that hyper talent, but hyper talent has hyper requirements as well. So if you were giving advice to a leader today on how to attract and keep the hyper talented, what are the kinds of things that come to mind, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think just as you spoke about, having a team in India, I have a lot of team in Latin America. The world is really global now. It's global talent. So first, don't constrain yourself to your own city, because your total addressable market for the talent is unnecessarily constrained. I would say when we look to hire remotely, even in our own country, but it could be globally, we tend to micromanage a lot. And I know that sounds so vague, and it's like an overused term. But I like to spin on that, where IQs tend to be doubled when you give people autonomy. And I think what we need to do, and this is maybe more manager than leadership, but give them like a threshold of when a decision reaches this, I want to be looped in right away. But anything else, just kind of keep a general record of some of the decisions that you made, and I trust you. And then every week, let's go through some of those, and we can kind of coach around that. I think that is much more effective than, like, your Amazon example is extreme, but it's not unusual in this world of even white collar work, like everything is broken into these super defined processes, super narrow scopes that um, people kind of are afraid to make mistakes anymore.
I think that leaders and managers underestimate how closely they're being watched by their people.
Yeah.
Even in a remote environment, um, your people then pay hyper attention when you do have meetings. They're looking for your reaction. They're looking for your engagement. Um, I have one particular team. It's not my team, but there's a team that I engage with, and they never turn on their cameras. When they might have a meeting of 7 or 8 people. Nobody has their cameras on except me, because my team, we all agreed we are going to have a cameras on environment all the time. Because in a real world environment, you don't walk into the office and say, "Hold on, let me put this box around my head. Nobody can see me today." In the real world, when you walk out into the world, people can see you. So, and then what happens if you are a cameras always on person? Well, then you do your hair, you scrub up a little bit, you brush your teeth. I mean, you do your grooming, both your virtual grooming and your real grooming, and it's just part of your way. Whereas I think if the camera is optional, then that creates a different set of habits and behaviors. And so what happens on that team is, from the top down, the team is taking their cue from their leader, and that's just one example. They watch, are you fun? Are you jovial? Are you engaged? Are you asking questions about them as well as the projects that are going on? And also, I had someone say to me, I had asked for some feedback on like how am I doing for this particular team, and it was initially all happy, positive, and which I get it. That's how stuff starts. But in reality, I'm sure I have challenges like any other leader. So I kept pressing and asking for some opportunity for me to enhance. And finally, someone said, "Well, Dan, sometimes I don't always follow your logic chain." And so I asked her, "Well, tell me what you mean by that." And she, to her credit, she said, "Well, I think you may get a vision about something and you've thought it through, but what you will often do is you'll tell us about A and Z, and you won't necessarily go the rest of it." And she said, for some people, that's fine. Some people just want to know Z. She said, "I'm a high context person. I'm an engineer. I kind of need to know systemically how did you," and it was beautiful. I really appreciated that. And I realized you're exactly right. What I didn't realize before was that she's paying attention to those things. She's looking for those things. And so sometimes we don't realize how under the microscope we are as leaders. And you obviously work in a broad range of cultures. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, as I know we're kind of coming toward the end of our time. Are there any true universalities when you look at the people that you work with in all of these various geographies and cultures? Is there anything that you could tell us that is, universally, this is something you can count on with just about everybody? And are there any like major differences or distinctions that might surprise people?
So I can only share from my own personal experience. I think the human side of people, and it sounds a little cliche and obvious, but we often forget, especially when we're working with people not in our hometown, that they have real lives just like us. They have dogs and cats and other pets and kids and parents, and people get sick. They have health issues. They have celebrations. They have birthday parties, whatever. We often forget about that. So it's really important to remember that. So it's not necessarily an attribute. I think it's just remembering that we're all human beings.
But worthy of the reminder, because again, back in today's world, it's so easy to blow past all of that
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just focus on the OKRs or the
yeah,
whatevers.
yeah. And I think the second thing is, this is just my own personal experience. The I also did an MBA with UCLA, but it was a joint program, so I had it in Singapore as well. So we would have, so I ended up with 2 degrees for the price of one. Like a home shopping network deal. And that's not all. So I ended up spending half my time in Westwood, California, where UCLA campus is, and half, at the Singapore campus. And it's interesting. Sometimes we forget about our own culture and hierarchy and so forth. So our experiences in Singapore were, or actually, I'll start with UCLA. Experiences at UCLA, the professors were often salivating for debate and discussion. They wanted their ideas to be tested. They wanted kind of like fierce, this
Mhm.
camp believes this camp believes this. You know, when we would try to do that in Singapore, the professors, I think, were kind of offended by that, and seniority matters. And I'm not trying to poo-poo on Singapore because wow, what have they built? Um, but I will say I think it's important for us to kind of recognize just as we're just as employees can kind of self-select in and self-select out, as leaders, we the more we define our culture, the more we recognize like the types of people that will also do well for us.
Yeah.
So if you're the person who's like the UCLA professor, I want debate, like
Mhm.
push me, test me, then don't hire a bunch of people from Singapore, who like, and vice versa. If you have a very clear vision, you don't want this thing to be muddled with all sorts of debate and random new ideas and
Mhm.
innovation. Is, by the way, like that's not always great either. Sometimes it can be super distracting, and people like me chase bright shiny things all day. So you need to have um, such hyper commitment that you can say no to everything else. Um, Maybe that other culture works a lot better, where
Mhm.
it's like everybody's role is crystal clear in making this vision happen. So we talk a lot about how to make life better for employees, but just recognizing what kind of company you're trying to build, I think, is equally important.
And what kind of leader are you without I don't say this in a judgmental way. Maybe you are a leader like those professors at UCLA, and maybe you're not. And even though I think in a classic business um, school environment or business school way, we would say, hey, you want an environment where everyone's comfortable sharing their thoughts and opinions and people push back, yada yada yada. But that's actually not true of every leader. There are some leaders who want to do all of the thinking in their own head, and then they want to deliver the direction, and then they want soldiers to march. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying recognizing yourself, what do you really want? And then hire people who align with what you really want, as opposed to people who come in thinking they're going to be part of the mind meld, but in fact, you just wanted arms and legs to do the work. If
Mm,
if that's who you are, or vice versa.
yeah.
Um, so Brian, this is fantastic. I really do appreciate this, and I will make sure for those who want to reach out to you, we have your contact information in the show notes so they can get a hold of you. I love hearing the whole story and how you've arrived at being the leader that you are today. And you also have your own podcast. Um, Tell me the name of it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So the podcast is called the Nearshore Cafe Podcast. We've got about 85 episodes. Half the episodes are people in the States who've worked with Latin America. They share their anecdotes and stories, challenges. It's not all roses. And the other half are really interesting people, tech investors, entrepreneurs, operators, software engineers from all over Latin America. They give a little piece of their journey, what they do, what they focus on, and some little nuggets on if you happen to travel to those cities that were featured on that episode. And then in regards to talent in Latin America, if this piqued your interest at all, we have a term for it. We call it nearshore curious. We're hearing a lot about Latin America these days, and just like AI, if you just want to learn more, constraints, moving hardware, different talent pockets. We do these conversations all the time, and the website is Plugg, Plugg.tech.
Fantastic. All right, Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will circle back with you, I'm sure, at some point in the not too distant future. Thanks again.